So today we are going to be talking about how to relate to our emotions as men. So in the modern world, you have probably noticed two different ways that people relate to their emotions. On one hand, you have people that overly identify with their emotions. They become effeminate, they become erratic, they become overly emotional and volatile and reactive. They're overly expressive. They tend to be very self-centered because it's all about their feelings. And then on the other hand of the spectrum, we have people who completely repress and deny the existence of their emotions at the expense of being able to have fulfilling relationships. Of course, on the left-hand side, they also don't have fulfilling relationships because of their over-emotionality. Both of these two extremes are clearly unhealthy, as any thinking person would be able to observe from the outside looking in. So, how is it that we can relate to our emotions in a healthy way that isn't on either end of these spectrums? What is the middle ground? So, the way that I have come to relate to my emotions as someone who has dealt with anger issues growing up, as well as becoming overly passive and effeminate when I was really into Eastern teachings and New Age philosophies when I was in my teenage years and young adulthood, I have come to a much more grounded and centered way of relating to my emotions. And that is basically this. Emotions are guests that enter into the house of our being. We are meant to acknowledge them and accept that they are there, listen to what they have to say, and then move on with our lives. Basically, once they've stayed for dinner, it's time to send them home, so to speak. So, when people are overly emotional or not emotional enough, they are essentially allowing these guests to overstay their welcome, or they are barring the door and not letting them in at all in the first place. So what does a healthy way of relating to them look like? Well, for example, let's take the emotion of sadness. If you find yourself in the overly emotional side of things, as soon as sadness enters the scene, you are going to wallow in it. You're going to just marinate yourself in the sadness, and you're just going to spend as much time as possible in that sadness, because once that feeling has arisen within yourself, you are not able to separate yourself from that feeling. And so you unconsciously find ways to perpetuate that emotion. And then on the other hand, when people who are not emotional or they are repressing their emotions experience sadness, they bottle it inside. They try and stuff it down and just keep it away, and it will inevitably lead to symptoms of depression or apathy, where you've spent so much time stuffing your emotions down that you're just emotionally blunted and you can't feel anymore. And then occasionally it'll just bubble up and you won't be able to control it, and you might just be sad for no particular reason. So what is the healthy way of relating to sadness? Sadness arises. Maybe it just kind of comes out of the blue. Much like a guest, if it calls at a inconvenient time, you might say politely, hey, this is not a good time, you can come back later. Like, for example, maybe sadness arises when you're at work, or when you're on a business meeting or something like that, or you're at an event. You should acknowledge it, recognize, okay, I'm feeling this sadness, this is something that needs to be processed, but now is not a good time. I will set the intention to revisit this feeling maybe later this evening when I get home and I can sit down by myself, listen to some calming music, and just totally process this and allow it to unfold. And so, much like a dinner guest who has tried to invite themselves a little too early, you say, all right, let's reschedule and come by this evening and we can have a nice dinner together. And so you sit down, you just focus on the feeling. You don't focus on it with the intent of trying to form your identity around it. You are simply allowing yourself to feel it fully in your body, in your felt experience, while simultaneously observing it and recognizing this is sadness. This is perfectly normal. This does not define who I am. There's also nothing wrong with me for feeling this emotion. And you just allow it to flow through your being until you're done. And I have found that in my experience, whenever I have feelings of sadness specifically, and I give myself the time of day to actually process it, it usually only takes like maybe 5 or 10 minutes to just process that, and then I feel so much lighter and better afterwards. And that is the aim of relating to our emotions in this way, especially as men, because we are taught from both sides of the spectrum that men are supposed to be super in touch with their emotions and they're supposed to be very emotional beings. And then on the other end, we have people who say, no, you're supposed to be stoic, no emotions whatsoever. And I disagree. I think that men who are healthy and embodied in their masculinity are capable of navigating their emotions with competence, with grace, with courage, and with compassion for themselves and with patience. And at the same time, they don't spend too much time in it. They do the work that's necessary to drive through that emotion, and then they move on with their lives. And that's that. So hopefully you found this video helpful. Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions about dealing with your emotions and processing them. And I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.